Every morning starts the same way. I wake up at 6 sharp without an alarm clock. It's a habit developed over 50 years of getting up for work. I'm 77 now, and there's no hurry to get anywhere, but my body remembers. I open my eyes, and the first thing I do is turn my head to the right, to the empty half of the bed. Eleanor died 5 years ago, but I still look for her silhouette in the morning. My house in Hastings is too big for one person. 2 stories, 4 bedrooms, a living room overlooking the sea. Once, it was noisy with children's voices and footsteps. Now only the creak of the floorboards under my feet and the ticking of the floor clock in the hall. I inherited it from my father, a family heirloom that Rollin once called junk that takes up space. My son never understood the value of things with a history. After breakfast, invariably oatmeal and strong tea, I go out for my morning walk. The route is always the same, along the waterfront to the old pier and back. 2 kilometers there, 2 back. The doctor says walking is good for my heart, maybe, but it's even healthier for my head, to clear my mind, to listen to the cries of the seagulls, to watch the fishermen. Today the sky is covered with gray clouds, but it's not raining. The wind from the sea brings the smell of salt and seaweed. I lift the collar of my jacket and walk with my cane. Not that I really need it, but it's safer. At my age, a fall can mean a fracture, and a fracture is the beginning of the end. I've seen it happen to friends. One fracture, then pneumonia, then a funeral. No, thank you. I prefer discretion. On the pier, as usual, sits Horace with his fishing rods. He's 68 and he thinks I'm old, even though we're only 9 years apart. "Good morning, Baxter," he shouts when he sees me. "Biting today." I nod and stop beside him. We're not friends, more like morning buddies. We talk about the weather, fish, sometimes politics, never about family. Horace has 2 daughters who call him every day and come for weekends with their grandchildren. I don't want to hear about it, and I think he can guess why. "How's your rheumatism?" I ask, looking at the sea. "Ah, to hell with rheumatism," laughs Horace. "As long as I can hold a fishing rod, the rest doesn't matter." We stand in silence for a few minutes. Then I say goodbye and walk back. At home, I'm left with nothing and a crossword puzzle from yesterday's paper. At 12:30, the phone rings. I know who it is before I even pick it up. It's always Talia, my daughter, who calls at this time on Wednesdays. "Hi, Dad," she says, in that peculiar tone she saves for talking to me, a mixture of duty and impatience. "How are you?" "I'm fine," I reply. We've long had this ritual of formal questions and short answers. "Kieran's been asking about you," she continues. "He says he wants to come over this weekend. Kieran is my grandson, Talia's son, 19 years old, a student at the local university. The only member of the family who seems genuinely interested in my life. Let him come," I say, a warmth creeping into my voice. "I'll be home." "Okay," Talia pauses. "Dad, have you heard from Rollin lately?" This is it. The real reason for the call. "No," I answer dryly. "Should you have?" "Well, he was going to talk to you about school." I sigh. Rollin, my 42-year-old son, has recently decided that he needs an MBA to break into his career, as he calls it. Another whammy. Before that, there were courses on real estate investing, an attempt to open an online store of vintage things, trainings on personal growth. All ended the same way, wasted money and a new breakthrough plan. "If he wants to talk, let him call me," I said. "Dad, you know how hard it is for him." Talia starts. "What exactly is hard for him? Dialing my number or asking for money directly instead of through you?" Talia sighs. "Okay, I'll just tell him you're expecting his call." After talking to my daughter, my mood is completely ruined. I sit down in the chair by the window and look out at the sea. The waves are choppy today, with white lambs. It's like my life. The further away it gets, the more stormy it gets. I think back to how it all started. When the kids were small, I worked 60 hours a week to provide for my family. Bridge engineering is a profession that requires precision and responsibility. Each of my projects is a structure that must withstand tons of stress and withstand the elements for decades. I was proud of my work. And I was even more proud of the fact that I could give my children what I was deprived of myself: a good education, trips abroad, the opportunity to do what they were interested in. Talia chose psychology. I paid for her university education, then her master's degree. Now she works as a school psychologist, is married to a history teacher, and has 2 children. She lives modestly but steadily. Roland, on the other hand. Rollin was always complicated, talented but unsteady. He started law school but dropped out in the 3rd year. Then economics, same story. Eventually, he got some kind of business management degree and got a job in a transportation company. He married Adelina, everyone calls her Lena, an accountant from an insurance firm. Smart woman, but calculating to the bone. She's the one I'm sure is pushing Rollin on this MBA idea. The phone rings, interrupting my musings. This time, it's Rollin. "Hey, Dad." His voice is too chipper, fake friendly. He only says that when he needs something. "Hello," I answer neutrally. "How are you doing? How's your health?" I can't complain. "That's great. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about something important." I'm listening. You see, the company is undergoing a restructuring. There's a lot of opportunity for those with the right education. I've given it a lot of thought, and I've decided it's a good time to get an MBA. It's a real chance to get to the next level. I remained silent, giving him a chance to finish what he called for. Anyway, I've already applied to the business school at the University of London. The program is designed for working professionals, and classes are in the evenings and weekends. It's very convenient. How much does it cost? I'm asking you straight out. Roland says a sum that makes my insides clench. You could buy a new car for that kind of money. A good car. It's a serious investment in the future, Dad, he continues. In 2 years, I could be promoted to department head. That's a whole different level of salary. Why doesn't the company pay for the training of its promising employees? I ask. Well, times are tough right now. Budgets have been cut. But as soon as the situation improves, I'm sure they'll reimburse such expenses. I snicker. It's always the same. Big prospects in the future, demanding my money now. Rollin, you're 42 years old, I say. Isn't it a little late to start over? Dad, that's what everybody does nowadays. Continuing education is the norm. People in their 50s change professions. What to speak of additional education? You already have a diploma, which I also paid for, by the way. That diploma is outdated. There are different requirements, different technology. We both shut up. I stare out the window at the gray sky and think about how many times I've had conversations like this before. Talia, at least, has always been grateful for help. Rollin, on the other hand. For him, my financial support has long been a matter of course. I'll think about it, I finally say. Dad, I need an answer within the week. Down payment. I said, I'll think about it. I interrupt him. I'll call you back in a couple days. After the conversation, I sit still for a long time. Something inside me resists. Fatigue, maybe. Or just the realization that this story is no different than the previous ones. Roland will get the money, start studying, then get cold feet, or find a reason why it's not working and it'll end up as another unfulfilled plan. But another part of me, the part of me that has always been a supportive father, says, what if this time it's different? What if it actually helps him? Isn't that your role, to give your kids a chance? I pull an old photo album out of my desk drawer. I flip through the pages. Here's Roland at 5 on the beach, building a sandcastle. Here he is at 10, riding the bike I gave him for his birthday, high school graduation, first day at university, then still in law school with burning eyes and big plans. When did it all go wrong? When did this bright, inquisitive boy turn into a perpetually disgruntled, constantly demanding man? Maybe I spoiled him too much? Or, on the contrary, was I too strict? Eleanor always said I was too demanding with children, especially Rollin. Not everyone has to build bridges that will last for centuries, she used to say. Some people just need to be happy enough. I close the album and put it back where it belongs. Then I pick up the phone and dial Rollin's number. Yes, Dad? He answers after the first ring, like he's been expecting a call. I'll pay for your tuition, I say. But on one condition. This is the last time I finance your endeavors. Do you understand? Sure, Dad. There's genuine joy in my voice. I knew you'd understand how important this is. You won't regret it. You'll see. In 2 years, I'll be on a whole different level. I hope so, I answer without much enthusiasm. Listen, Lena and I were thinking of taking you out to dinner this weekend to celebrate the beginning of a new stage, so to speak. What do you say? Kieran's coming over this weekend. Oh, well, bring him along. It'll be a family dinner. It's been a long time since we've all been together. I agree, even though my inner voice says it's a bad idea. Dinners with Rollin and Lena always end the same way. They talk about their plans and problems, completely ignoring my presence, unless it's about money. After the conversation, I feel a strange emptiness. It would seem that I did a good deed. I helped my son, gave him a chance to change his life for the better. Why do I feel so uneasy? In the evening, I go out on the porch and look at the sunset. The clouds have cleared and the sun is coloring the sea in orange-gold tones. It's times like this that I feel Eleanor's absence most keenly. She loves sunsets, said each one was as unique as a fingerprint. Look closely, Baxter, she used to say. There'll never be another sunset like this again. I look up at the sky and think about my decision. Helping Rollin is the right thing to do, even if he throws it all away again, even if it's another empty venture. I'm his father. I'll help him as long as I can. But deep down, I know that sooner or later, the day will come when I'll have to say no, and that day may be closer than I realize. It's been 3 months since I agreed to pay Rollin's tuition. Autumn has changed to winter, and now my morning walks are accompanied by a cold wind off the sea, chilling me to the bone even through my wool coat. I started going out later when the sun was already rising above the horizon, though I still woke up just as early. I've only seen Rollin 5 times in these months. 3 of those were when he came to pick up checks for the next tuition payment. Each visit lasted no more than half an hour and followed the same script. He told me about his academic success, how much he was valued by his professors, what prospects lay ahead of him. And then he looked at his watch and remembered urgent matters. Yesterday he came again, this time with Lena. They entered the house, bringing with them the smell of expensive perfume and that special energy of people who are always in a hurry. Lena kissed me on the cheek, a formal gesture that I had learned to accept with an equally formal cordiality. "Baxter, have you lost weight?" she asked, giving me an appraising look. "I hope you're eating right?" I assured her there was nothing wrong with my diet. I didn't tell her that my appetite wasn't what it used to be, and that cooking for myself alone seemed like a waste of time. We went into the living room. Rollin immediately took my chair by the window, the one where I spend most of the day, looking at the sea and remembering the past. He did it automatically, without thinking, and somehow that little thing hurt me more than it should have. "How are your studies going?" I asked, taking a seat on the couch next to Lena. Rollin perked up. "It's great. I'm one of the best in the group. Professor Hodgkin said my presentation on strategic planning was the best of the semester." "Rollin always stays up late working on assignments," Lena chimed in. Sometimes I can't get him to bed until 2 in the morning." She laughed as if she had said something very witty. Roland smiled at her with that special smile they save for each other, a little condescending, a little conspiratorial, as if they knew something everyone else didn't. "How's work going?" I asked. "It's still the same." Roland shrugged. "But I've already applied for a transfer to the Strategic Development Department. As soon as I get my degree, I should be considered first." "It's a different salary level," Lena added, "and a different status." I nodded, not knowing what else to say. The conversation inevitably returned to what they'd come for. "Dad, there's a situation there," Roland began, tapping his fingers nervously on the arm of his chair. "The university announced a tuition increase starting next semester. Something to do with inflation and program updates." I felt a familiar irritation rising inside. "How much of a raise?" Roland quoted an amount that was 15% more than the original amount. "That's a lot of money." "You see, it's not my fault," he added hastily. "It's their decision. But I can't quit halfway through, can I?" I looked at him, my 42-year-old son, who was now speaking in the tone of a resentful teenager. Then I shifted my gaze to Lena. She was sitting with a perfectly straight back, hands folded in her lap, watching me with an expression of polite expectation on her face. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll pay the difference." "Thanks, Dad," Roland glowed. "I knew you'd understand." "You're so generous, Baxter," Lena cooed. "Roland so appreciates your support." I stood up and walked over to the secretary where I kept my checkbook. I wrote a check for the amount requested and held it out to Roland. He took it as if it were some trifle not worth much attention. "By the way," he said, putting the check away in his wallet, "have you thought of selling this house? It's too big for one man, and it must be expensive to maintain." "I'm not going to sell the house," I said firmly. "But it's unsustainable." Roland didn't back down. "You could buy something smaller and invest the difference. Or, I don't know, spend it on traveling. You don't go anywhere." "I don't need to travel, and I'm not selling the house where I've lived for 40 years and where my kids grew up." Roland glanced at Lena, and I caught something in that look that made my insides clench. A mixture of irritation and condescension, as if I were not a father, but a capricious child who had to listen patiently and then do it his way. They left 15 minutes later, saying they had to catch an appointment, the usual excuse. I stood at the window and watched them get into Roland's new car, a shiny silver sedan that he'd bought on credit, which he'd somehow mentioned. As the car sped around the corner, I sank into the chair and closed my eyes. Something had changed in our relationship, and that change hadn't happened today or yesterday. It had built up gradually, year after year, visit after visit, until it had become a chasm that could no longer be bridged. Ironically, I, who had spent my life building bridges, had failed to build one, the most important one. A week after their visit, Kieran called. My grandson is the only person in the family whose calls I genuinely enjoy. "Grandpa, I was wondering if I could stop by your place on Saturday. It's my day off at the library, and I was wondering—" "Sure, come on over," I interrupted him. "I'd be glad to see you." There was none of that fake cheerfulness in his voice that Roland had when he needed something. Kieran just wanted to spend time with me, and the thought of it made me feel warmer. He arrived early on Saturday, bringing fresh bread from the bakery and a packet of my favorite tea. We sat on the veranda, despite the cold. Kieran claimed that the sea air helped him think better, and talked about everything in the world: his studies, the books he was reading, news from the world and from the city. "You know, grandfather," he said at one point, looking at the sea, "sometimes I think I was born at the wrong time. I think I would have been happier in your generation, when people were building something real instead of chasing likes on social media." I smiled. My generation had its own problems, believe me, and their own ways of wasting time. But you were creating something real, bridges, roads, buildings, something that stays for decades, for centuries. And you? Doesn't the study of history create anything real? Kieran thought about it. I suppose it does. Understanding, context. But it's not like building a bridge for people to walk on. I looked at my grandson, a 19-year-old boy with intelligent eyes and a serious expression, and thought that there was much more of me in him than in my own son. A strange joke of genetics. By the way, I saw Dad the other day, Kieran said, as if he'd read my mind. He came by to show off his new car. Yeah, I saw it. Impressive. Mom didn't like it. Said it was a waste of money, especially since he hadn't paid off the loan on the last one yet. I didn't say anything. Roland's financial decisions had always been, controversial. He talked a lot about his studies, Kieran continued, and how you were helping him. That's great, grandfather. Not every father would support his son at that age. There was no irony in his words, only genuine admiration. He really thought I was doing the right thing by helping Roland, and that made it even harder. When Kieran left, I sat at the window for a long time, staring out at the darkening sea. It was snowing again, a rare occurrence in Hastings, where winters are usually mild and rainy. Large flakes swirled in the light of the street lamps, creating the illusion of movement where there was none. The next day, Talia called. "Dad, are you okay?" Kieran said, "You look tired." "I'm perfectly fine," I replied. "I just didn't get much sleep." "He's worried about you. We all are." The all in her mouth sounded strange. Roland certainly wasn't worried, except for the state of my bank account. "I don't need to be worried, Talia. I need to be left alone." There was a pause. I could almost see her biting her lip, a gesture inherited from her mother, a gesture she made whenever she didn't know what to say. "Oh, Roland told me he offered to sell you the house," she said finally. "I don't think it's such a bad idea, Dad. It's too big for you, and the stairs are becoming more and more of a problem, aren't they? You could find something more comfortable, on the same level, closer to the center of town." "And to you, of course," I added bitterly. "What's wrong with that? We could see each other more often. I could come by after work." "Talia, I'm not selling the house, and I don't want to talk about it anymore," she sighed. "Okay, Dad. Whatever you say. Just, think about it, okay?" It took me a long time to calm down after talking to my daughter. This idea of selling the house was clearly not a coincidence. They'd discussed it amongst themselves, Roland, Lena, maybe even Talia, discussing me, my life, my money, as if I wasn't a living person with my own desires and feelings, but a problem to be solved. 2 weeks later, I happened to overhear a conversation that made me reconsider a lot of things in my relationship with my son. It happened on a Sunday. I was going to the local library. They were hosting a meeting with the author of a historical novel set in Hastings during the Napoleonic Wars. I read the book and found it fascinating, albeit with some historical inaccuracies. I was just about ready to leave when the phone rang. It was Lena, asking if I was home and if she and Roland could come over for half an hour to discuss something important. I said I was going to leave, but I could stay for a while. They arrived 20 minutes later. I opened the door and let them in without taking off my coat, a clear demonstration that I didn't have much time. "We won't be long, Dad," Roland assured me, walking into the living room. I offered them tea, but they declined. So I sat down and prepared to listen to another story about why they needed money. But the conversation took an unexpected direction. Roland started talking about my will. "You see, Dad, Lena and I were thinking, you're not getting any younger, and we need to be prepared for anything." I felt a wave of resentment rising inside. "I'm not going to die yet, if that's what you mean." "Though no one is," Lena interjected with a strained smile. "But inheritance planning is an important part of financial strategy." I looked at her, trying to figure out if she'd really just used the term financial strategy in a conversation about my death. I have a will, I said dryly. My lawyer has it, and it's all accounted for. Yeah, but when was the last time you updated it? Rollin asked. It's been 5 years since Mom died. Maybe some of the clauses are out of date. My will is in perfect order, but you haven't told us what's in it. We just want to be prepared, you know? So there's no surprises or, misunderstandings. I looked at my son, a tall man with a beginning bald spot and creases in his mouth that grew deeper when he was nervous, as he was now, and suddenly realized that I didn't know him at all. Who was this man, waiting so impatiently for me to die so he could inherit my estate? Rollin, I said slowly, I will not discuss my will with you. Not now, not ever. When the time comes, you will know all you need to know. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm late for a meeting. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. They stood up too, exchanging glances of disappointment. We walked out together. I locked the door and headed for the bus stop, and they headed for their car. I was already a few meters away when I heard Lena's voice. They hadn't noticed that I'd stopped to fix my scarf. Old cheapskate, she said with annoyance, clinging to his money like he's going to take it to his grave. Calm down, Rollin replied. Sooner or later he'll give it to us anyway. Where can he go? But how long can we wait? He's literally swimming in money, but he lives like a hermit. What's the point of saving if you don't spend it? Don't start again. We'll get what's coming to us. We just have to be patient. Patient? How many years have we put up with his senile whims? It's about time he realized you need this help now, not someday when he's dead. Their voices grew quieter as they got into the car and closed the doors. I stood there, stunned by what I'd heard, unable to move. Everything inside was icy, and it had nothing to do with the winter cold. I didn't go to meet the writer. Instead, I walked slowly home, feeling the heaviness in my chest growing with each step. At home, I sat in a chair by the window and stared out to sea for a long time, trying to make sense of what I had heard. They were waiting for me to die. My own son and his wife saw me as an obstacle to the money they considered their own. To them, I was not a father, not a man with feelings and thoughts, but merely an aging ATM machine that was too slow to dispense the right amount of money. All night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, replaying their words in my head, remembering all the times I'd seen impatience or irritation in Roland's eyes. How blind I'd been. I thought I was helping my son get back on his feet, giving him the chance he deserved. In reality, I was just indulging his greed and irresponsibility. This morning, I made a decision. If our relationship was to be saved, we had to set the record straight. I had to come clean, without innuendo or pretense. I picked up the phone and dialed Rollin's number. Dad? He sounded surprised. I rarely called him first. Rollin, I want to invite you and Lena to dinner Friday night. At the Seabreeze. At the restaurant? He didn't hide his amazement. I really seldom went to restaurants, preferring to cook at home or make do with simple snacks. Yes, I'll make a reservation for 7 o'clock tonight. It's important to me, Rollin. Please be there on time. Sure, Dad. Is something wrong? We need to talk. About a lot of things. After the call, I felt a strange sense of relief. The decision had been made, and there was no turning back. On Friday, we're going to have an honest talk. I'll tell her everything that's been building up over the years. My hopes, my frustrations, my pain that my own son sees me only as a source of money. And then we'll see. I called the Sea Breeze, one of the best restaurants in Hastings, and booked a table by the window overlooking the sea. Then dialed Talia's number. Talia, I'm inviting you and your husband and children to dinner on Friday. At the Sea Breeze, 7 p.m. The restaurant? She, like Rollin, couldn't hide her surprise. Is it a special occasion? I just want to get the family together. Rollin and Lena are coming too. Okay, Dad, sure, we'll be there. After hanging up the phone, I went to the window. The sea was choppy today, the white-crested waves crashing against the shore, leaving wisps of foam on the sand. Like my life, turbulent, unpredictable, but still subject to the rhythm of the tides. I decided that dinner at the restaurant was my last chance. One last attempt to get through to Rollin, to make him see me not as a bag of money, but as a father who loved him no matter what. If that didn't work, well, then I'd have to take more drastic measures. I arrived at the restaurant in a cab 20 minutes before the appointed time. The driver, a young guy with tattoos on his arms, chattered on and on about the weather and the tourists that would flood into Hastings as soon as it got warmer. I answered one-word answers, thinking about the upcoming conversation with my son. The Sea Breeze was located on the seafront in an old sandstone building with large windows facing the sea. Inside, it was warm and cozy. Dim light, snow-white tablecloths, soft music. The maitre d', a tall man with perfect posture, escorted me to the reserved table. The table was for 6, with a beautiful view of the evening sea where the lights of fishing boats twinkled in the coming dusk. Now, will you have something to drink while you wait for the other guests? The maitre d' asked. I ordered a glass of whiskey, Glenfiddich, 12 years old. Eleanor had always teased me about my fondness for the drink. Baxter and his Glenfiddich are an inseparable pair, she used to say with a smile. Today I needed that little encouragement, that sip of liquid warmth and reassurance. Talia and her husband and children were the first to arrive. Kieran, excited to see me as always, hugged me tightly and sat next to me. Madison, his 16-year-old sister, seemed less enthusiastic. She clearly didn't want to spend Friday night with her family when her friends were probably out partying somewhere in town. Jeffrey, Talia's husband, shook my hand and immediately delved into the menu, studying the wine list. Talia looked tense, as if she had a premonition that this dinner wouldn't be the usual family gathering. Rollin and Lena haven't arrived yet? She asked, looking around. No, but there's still time, I answered, glancing at my watch. It was 5 minutes to 7. We ordered drinks, wine for the adults, juice for Madison, and beer for Kieran, who was turning 19. The conversation flowed at a leisurely pace, discussing the weather, the latest city news, and the kids' schoolwork. I caught myself thinking that I couldn't remember the last time we'd sat like this, as a family, without hurry or fuss. Time passed. 7 o'clock, 7:15, 7:30. Roland and Lena still hadn't shown up. I noticed Talia checking her phone several times, apparently waiting for a message from her brother. We had already ordered appetizers and eaten them when finally the restaurant door opened and they walked in. Roland was wearing a new suit, dark blue, with a fashionable narrow tie. Lena was in a tight black dress and high-heeled shoes, with bright makeup and intricate hair. They looked as if they'd come to a social gathering rather than a family dinner. Sorry I'm late, Roland said as he approached the table. The traffic was unbelievable. I knew that wasn't true. There's no traffic in Hastings at this time of year and this hour. Have you ordered yet? Lena asked, sitting down across from me and smoothing the napkin on her lap. I'm starving. We were waiting for you, I replied, but the appetizers have already been eaten. Oh, that's okay, she waved her hand. I prefer the main course anyway. Diet, you know? The waiter came to take the order. Roland chose the most expensive dish on the menu, marbled beef steak, and a bottle of red wine for an obscene amount of money in my opinion. Lena ordered the lobster. The others chose more modest dishes. Me, baked cod, Talia, pasta with seafood, Jeffrey and Kieran, steaks, but simpler than Rollins. Madison limited herself to a salad. So, Father, Roland began as the waiter stepped away. To what do we owe this unexpected invitation? You're not a restaurant person. He sounded a little sarcastic. I felt the irritation rising inside me, but I tried to stay calm. I just wanted to get the family together, I said. We don't get to see each other much. Yeah, well, you prefer your hermitage, Rollin grinned. Sometimes Lena and I think you've forgotten we exist. That's not true, I countered. It's just that everyone has their own life. You have yours, and I have mine. What life, Dad? Rollin spread his hands. You sit all day in four walls, looking out the window and counting seagulls. That's not living. That's existence. Rollin, Talia said quietly. Don't start. He ignored her. Seriously, Father, you need to get out more. Do something. Maybe join a retirement club? I hear they have some interesting activities. Bingo, dances, tea parties. He said these words with such a condescending tone that I wanted to get up and leave right away. But I held back. For Talia and the grandchildren. I'm happy with my life, Rollin, I said in an even voice. Not everyone needs all the hustle and bustle. Happy? He snorted. You live like you're living in the last century. No computer, no smartphone, even your TV is prehistoric. That's enough for me. Because you don't know what you're missing. The whole world has long ago entered the digital age, and you still read paper newspapers and listen to the radio. Lena picked up on that. Baxter, Rollin is right. Your way of life, it's so limited. You could travel, meet people, enjoy everything the modern world has to offer. On his money, Kieran muttered, but loud enough for everyone to hear. There was an awkward silence. Rollin gave his nephew an annoyed look. What does money have to do with it? It's about quality of life. It's about not living alone when you can what? I interrupted. Spend money on things I don't need. Travel the world pointlessly? Make fake acquaintances with people who don't care about me? That's it. Rollin leaned back in his chair. It's the money. You're worried about every penny, afraid to spend too much. I'm not afraid of spending money. I just don't see the point in spending it mindlessly. The food arrived, and for a few minutes the conversation stopped. I had hoped that the topic was over, but alas, Rollin was just getting started. You know, Dad, he said, cutting his steak, sometimes I think you live so modestly, not because you like it, but because you can't afford it. But that's not true, is it? You have plenty of money. Rollin, Talia intervened. Let's not. No, sis, let's do it, he cut her off. Someone has to tell Father the truth. He's saving money, denying himself everything, and for what? So the state can have it all? Or so that we'll have to fight over the inheritance for years? Rollin, Talia exclaimed, stop this at once. What's the big deal? He shrugged his shoulders. I'm just saying what everyone is thinking. Father lives like a hermit when he could be enjoying life, or helping his children while he's still alive, not after he's dead. I looked at my son and didn't recognize him. Where had gone the boy who once listened with rapt attention to my stories of bridges and roads? Who was proud that his father was building something real and lasting? I'm helping you, Rollin, I said quietly. I'm paying your tuition. Yes, and I'm grateful for that, he nodded, but there was no gratitude in his eyes. But you have to admit, it's a drop in the bucket for you. You could do so much more. Like what? Well, you could help us with the down payment on the house, or pay for Lena's continuing education, or just give you all your money and move into a nursing home, I finished for him. I didn't say that, Rollin frowned, but you could have been more generous. More generous, I repeated. So, paying for your education, the car I helped you buy 10 years ago, helping you fix up your apartment, it's not enough. Baxter, Lena interjected. No one's saying you're not helping. It's just, you could do it with a little more joy, you know? Without all that grumbling and sighing about being robbed. Exactly, Rollins said. Every time I ask for help, you look at me like I'm here to take your kidney, not to ask for a little financial support. A little? I could feel my insides boiling. A little? Do you know how much I've spent on you over the years? Oh, here we go. Rollin rolled his eyes. I'm gonna lecture you on how hard you've worked for money, how you've saved every penny, how you've worked your ass off. Rollin, that's enough, Talia said sharply. You're out of line. No, let him go on. I looked my son straight in the eye. I want to hear what else you think about me and my money. Rollin sipped his wine and grinned. All right, since you insist. I think you're a cheapskate who doesn't know how to enjoy life and doesn't let others do so. You sit on your money like a dragon on treasure and think everyone is out to steal from you. You don't trust your own children? You think we're, what? Spenders? Losers who can't take care of themselves? Rollin, I tried to speak calmly, though my insides were churning. I've always supported you. Always. Even when you dropped out of one university after another, even when you changed jobs every 6 months, even when you went into debt because of your crazy ideas. I've always been there for you, and I continue to help you, even though you're a grown man who should be supporting himself and his family. Oh, of course. Rollin theatrically splashed his hands. Holy Father, who sacrificed everything for the sake of ungrateful children. You never miss an opportunity to remind us of that, do you? Every time I ask for help, you make me feel like a beggar. Every damn time. I never… No, listen to me. Rollin raised his voice, attracting the attention of the neighboring tables. You think I enjoy asking you for money? You think I enjoy having to beg my father at 42? But what am I supposed to do if my job pays a pittance and promotions are only given to those with the right education? Maybe you should have thought of that before, I remarked. When I paid for your first degree, and the second, and the third? Here. Roland jabbed his finger at me. That's it. You think I'm a loser? A man who can't make the right decision? I didn't say that. But I thought it. I see it in your eyes every time I come to see you. That look. Like you're looking at a stray dog. A mixture of pity and disgust. I felt my hands shaking. This conversation had gone too far. I looked at the rest of the family. Talia was sitting there, eyes downcast, clearly embarrassed by her brother's behavior. Jeffrey was studying his plate with exaggerated interest. Madison was staring at her phone, and only Kieran was looking straight at me with an expression of support and sympathy. Oh, Rollin, I said, trying to maintain the remnants of calm. I never thought of you as a failure. You're my son, and I love you no matter what. But I'm tired of you only seeing me as a wallet. I'm a man, Rollin, your father, not an ATM machine. Lena, who had been silent until then, suddenly laughed, a harsh, unpleasant laugh. Oh, Baxter, don't be so dramatic. No one thinks you're an ATM. It's just that you have the opportunity to help your son, so why not do it gladly, without all this, mental anguish? Gladly, I looked at my daughter-in-law. You want me to happily give away money that you immediately spend on new cars and designer clothes instead of saving for your own future? Ah, that's the thing, Rollins smirked. You don't like the way we spend money. You want to control not only how much to give us, but also what we should spend it on. I want you to grow up, Rollin. I couldn't take it anymore. I want you to realize that money does not appear out of thin air, that it must be earned, not begged from your parents. You're so old-fashioned, Dad, Rollins shook his head. Money was created to make life more comfortable, not to lie dead in the accounts. As long as you're alive, it's supposed to work, to bring you joy. For you, for me, for all of us. Joy? I grinned bitterly. The joy I see in your eyes when you come in for your next check? The joy with which you ask about my will, wondering how much longer you have to wait? The restaurant was suddenly very quiet, or so I thought. What do you mean? Rollin asked slowly. I heard your conversation, I said, looking at him and Lena. After you came over to talk about the will, I heard Lena call me an old cheapskate, and you say that sooner or later I'll give you the money anyway. Rollin's face changed. First there was surprise, then embarrassment, and then anger. Eavesdropping, huh? He hissed. How very senile. I wasn't eavesdropping. You were talking loud enough to think I'd already left. So what? Lena intervened. Yes, we were talking about money. It's only natural. You have a lot. We don't have much. Of course, we hope for your help. What's so shameful about that? It's shameful to wait until I die to inherit, I answered. It's shameful to see me only as a source of money, not as a person. No one is waiting for you to die, Baxter. Lena rolled her eyes. Don't be melodramatic. How long can we wait? He's literally swimming in money and living like a hermit, I quoted her words. That didn't sound like wishing me a long life. Lena blushed, either from embarrassment or anger. You're taking words out of context, she said. I know exactly what you meant, I interrupted. You both think I should give you my money now, without waiting to die, that I've lived too long and I'm keeping you from enjoying what you think is rightfully yours. Dad, you've got it all wrong, Rollin began, but there was no sincerity in his voice. No, I got it right. I finally got it right. To you, I'm neither father nor father-in-law. I'm a wallet on legs, an ATM machine that sometimes breaks down and refuses to dispense money. Dad, please, Talia put her hand on mine. Let's not. I gently released her hand and stood up. I'm sorry, but I have nothing more to do here. Where are you going? Rollin stood up as well. We haven't finished talking yet. I'm done, I replied calmly. Everything I wanted to say and hear has already been said and heard. You can't just leave. Rollin was indignant. We're in a restaurant. We haven't even ordered dessert yet. Dessert's on me. I pulled out my wallet and put my credit card on the table. Jeffrey, would you be so kind as to pay when you're done? Talia, Kieran, Madison. I nodded at them. I'm sorry for ruining your evening. Baxter, you're acting like a child, Lena said. You put on this melodrama, and now you're running away. I looked at her, a beautiful woman with cold eyes, and thought I'd never really known her, nor had I ever really known my son. Goodbye, I said, and headed for the exit. Dad, Rollin called out to me, you can't just leave. We haven't discussed my studies yet. The next installment is in 2 weeks. I didn't turn around. I walked, staring straight ahead, feeling the stares of the other diners. I guess they thought I was an old man, senile, running away from my own family. Let them think what they wanted. It was cold and dark outside. I took a deep breath of sea air, feeling my racing heart gradually calm down. The wind from the sea ruffled my coat, but I wasn't cold. There was a fire burning inside, not rage, no, determination. I walked along the promenade, listening to the sound of the waves and the cries of the seagulls. It wasn't a long way home, but I didn't call a cab. I wanted to walk, to think, to reflect on everything that had happened in the restaurant. Roland had never respected me. I realized that now. Perhaps he'd never loved me. Really love me with the unconditional love I felt for him. To him, I had always been just a means to an end, a source of money, a problem solver, an ATM. By the time I reached home, it was late. My hands were so cold that I struggled to put the key in the lock. The house was quiet and dark. I kept the hallway light on, reached the living room by touch, and sank into my chair by the window. The moon illuminated the sea with a silvery light. The waves were crashing on the shore, leisurely, rhythmic, endless. The sea was in no hurry. It had an eternity ahead of it. I had no eternity, just the remaining years. Maybe 10, maybe 5, maybe less. And I wasn't going to spend any more of them indulging my son and his wife's greed. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed the number of my lawyer, Henry Wakefield. We'd been friends for 40 years, and I knew I could call him even at night. Baxter? Henry's voice sounded concerned. What's wrong? I'm sorry to call you so late, Henry. I need to cancel my son's tuition right away. and make a change in my will." "What happened?" he asked, instantly switching to professional mode. "It's a long story. I'll tell you when I see you. How soon can you finalize everything?" "The payment can be canceled as early as tomorrow if you have all the necessary documents. The will is more complicated, but it's manageable. Let's meet in my office in the morning." "Thank you, Henry. I'll be there at 9 o'clock." As I hung up the phone, I felt strangely relieved. It was like I'd lifted a weight off my shoulders that I'd been carrying for years. The decision had been made and there was no turning back. I would no longer fund Rollins' education. I will not support his irresponsibility and infantilization. I will not let him and Lena treat me like an ATM machine. Let him learn to live within his means. Let him learn what it's like to rely on himself, not his father's wallet. Maybe that'll be the best lesson I ever taught him. I sat by the window until dawn, looking out to sea and thinking about what would happen next. About how Roland would react when he found out I'd canceled his tuition. About what Talia and the grandchildren would say. About whether I was being too cruel. But every time the doubts began to gnaw at me, I remembered Roland and Lena's words, their dismissive looks, their certainty that my money was theirs by right. And the resolve returned. I am old, but I am not stupid. And I won't be treated like a cash cow anymore, even if it's my own son, especially if it's about him. That morning I met Henry in his office, a small but elegant space in an old building on the main street of Hastings. Henry Wakefield, my lawyer and friend, greeted me with his usual understated warmth. In his 72 years, he remained trim and energetic, with a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue. "You look lousy, Baxter," he remarked, seating me in the chair across from his desk. "Bad night?" "Sleepless," I admitted. But the decision had been made. I told him about last night's dinner, about what Rollin and Lena had said, about my decision to stop funding my son's education. Henry listened without interrupting, only nodding or frowning occasionally. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked when I was done. "Rollin will not forgive you for such a blow." "I'm not looking for his forgiveness, Henry. I want him to finally grow up." Henry sighed and pulled a file folder out of his desk drawer. "Okay, here's the contract with the university. You're listed as the payor. We can send a formal notice to stop paying. But be warned, it could have serious repercussions for Rollin. If he doesn't find another source of funding, he could be expelled." "I understand," I nodded. "But that's his problem, not mine." We filled out the necessary paperwork. Henry promised to send the notice to the university today. Then we discussed the changes in the will. I decided to revise the shares of the inheritance, significantly reducing Roland's portion in favor of Talia and the grandchildren, especially Kieran. "Don't you think that's too harsh?" Henry asked when we were done. "He is your son, after all." "A son who only sees me as a wallet," I grinned bitterly. "No, Henry, it's not harsh. It's fair." When I got home, I felt strangely empty. It was as if I'd let all the anger and frustration out of me. And now, there was an emptiness inside. I sat down in a chair by the window and looked out at the sea, trying to make sense of what had happened. The phone rang around 3 in the afternoon. I knew it was Rollin before I even looked at the screen. "What the hell is going on?" he yelled as soon as I picked up the phone. "I just got a call from the university. They said you canceled your payment. Is there some kind of mistake?" "No, Rollin," I answered calmly. "There's no mistake." "What?" He seemed unable to believe his ears. "Are you serious? You really canceled my tuition?" "Yes." "But, why? Because of yesterday? Did you take offense like a child? You got mad and decided to punish me?" "I'm not punishing you, Rollin. I'm just not paying your tuition anymore. You're a grown man. You're on your own." "On my own?" his voice shrieked. "Do you know how much this program costs? Where am I going to get that kind of money?" "I don't know. Maybe a bank. People usually take out loans for education." A loan? You're suggesting I take a loan when you have plenty of money? It's, that's just. He gasped with indignation, unable to find the words. My, Rollin, I said. Yesterday you made it clear to me that you think I'm a cheapskate who does not know how to live, nor to give life to others. That all I do is to sit on my money and not give it to you. Well, now you're right. I really won't give you another penny. You can't do that. There was an undercurrent of despair in his voice. I was counting on that money. I have plans, commitments. Now you're going to have to rethink your plans. Dad, listen. His tone suddenly changed, pleading, I admit I was wrong yesterday. I said too much. But you realize it was just an emotional reaction. I didn't mean to offend you. It's not about offense, Rollin. It's about respect, or rather, the lack thereof. I respect you. I swear. Yesterday it just came out. I was cranky, tired after work and school. But I didn't mean what I said. Yes, I did, I said. Every word, both you and Lena. You really do think I'm a stingy old man who keeps you from living, who takes too long to die and doesn't give you your money. No, that's not true, he was almost shouting. We never thought that. I heard your conversation, Rollin. Do you remember? You didn't know I was around, and you spoke frankly. There was silence in the receiver. Then Rollin spoke in a completely different tone, cold and hard. So that's how it is? You decided to teach me a lesson? Show me who's the boss? I've decided to stop funding a man who doesn't appreciate my help and takes it for granted. That's fine. That's just fine, he said with bitterness in his voice. You know what? I can do this without your money. I'll take out a loan, finish my damn degree, and do it all on my own. And you can sit in your big empty house and enjoy your money. It's the only thing you've got left. He hung up before I could answer. I sat staring at the phone in my hand and felt a strange mixture of emotions. Sadness, disappointment, but also relief. It was as if a boil that had been aching and tormenting me for a long time had burst. That evening, Talia called. Dad, what's going on? She asked worriedly. Roland's furious. He says you canceled his tuition. I did, I confirmed. But why? Because of what happened at the restaurant. Not only that, I sighed. Talia, your brother hasn't seen me as a father in a long time. To him, I'm just a source of money, and I'm tired of it. Dad, he's not like that. He just, he has a hard time expressing his feelings. You know Rollin? I thought I did, but I guess I was wrong. Talia was silent for a moment, then asked cautiously, So what now? You'll never forgive him? It's not about forgiveness, Talia. It's that it's time Rollin learned to live by his own wits and his own means. He's 42 years old, and he still expects Daddy to solve all his problems. But this study is really important to him. He's put so much into it. Time, effort, and not a penny of his own money, I finished for her. I paid for everything. Well, now it's his turn to invest. Talia sighed. I understand how you feel, Dad. I really do. But Rollin, he can't do it alone. He doesn't have that kind of money, and Lena, what? She's furious. She says Rollin's an idiot for not keeping you on the hook. Sorry to be rude, but those are her words, not mine. I chuckled. Lena had always been blunt. Tell your brother to learn to live within his means. It's a useful skill. After I'd talked to Talia, I sat at the window for a long time, staring out at the darkening sea. Somewhere out there, in another part of Hastings, my son was probably thrashing around the apartment in a rage, or sitting staring at the wall, trying to realize what had happened. That his plan to get another education at my expense had failed. I felt no gloating or satisfaction, only fatigue and a quiet sadness. How did we get to this point? When did the father-son relationship turn into a sponsor-beggar relationship? Where was the point of no return at which everything went downhill? A week went by without hearing from Rollin. Then another. I went about my usual business, reading, walking along the promenade, sometimes meeting Horace on the pier. Kieran stopped by twice, talking about his studies, about a new book he'd recently read on the history of the Norman conquest. He made no mention of the conflict with Rollin, for which I was grateful. The third week after our conversation, Rollin showed up on my doorstep, unannounced in the evening, when I was about to go to bed. "We need to talk," he said, standing on the porch. He looked gaunt, dark circles under his eyes. I stepped back silently, letting him into the house. We walked into the living room. Roland sat on the couch, and I sat in my chair by the window. It was like there was an invisible wall between us. I took out a loan," he said at last, "to continue my studies." "Good," I nodded. "That's a wise decision." "Smart?" He grinned bitterly. "Do you know what the interest rate is now? I'll be paying it off for 10 years. That's what most people do, Rollin. They take out an education loan and then pay it off. It's not unusual. Maybe not for you, but for me?" He hesitated. "I've got a family. I've got responsibilities. Now I have to tighten my belt." "It's called living within your means," I said. A useful skill, as I'd told Talia. Roland looked at me with ill-concealed anger. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? The fact that you put me in my place?" No, Rollin. I'm not enjoying it. It pains me to see that my son, at 42, doesn't understand the basics about money and responsibility. "Oh, don't start your lectures." He jumped up off the couch. "I didn't come for that." "What did you come for?" He froze, as if this simple question took him by surprise. "Yeah?" "I wanted to understand why you did it, why you suddenly cut our whole relationship off. I didn't end it, Rollin. It happened a long time ago, and you initiated it. I just finally accepted that fact." "What are you talking about?" "I'm saying that I stopped being a father to you a long time ago. I've become an ATM machine, a funding source for your endless breakthrough ideas that never amount to anything." "That's not true." He sat down again, as if his legs wouldn't hold him up. "You've always been a father figure to me. Just complicated father." "Complicated?" I raised my eyebrows. "What was complicated about me? Was it that I didn't write a check when you came up with a brilliant idea? The fact that you never believed in me," he blurted out. "Never supported my endeavors. Always looked at me with that skepticism, like you knew I'd fail. I've always supported you, Rollin. Financially, always. Even when I thought your ideas were crazy." "Money isn't the only form of support," he snapped. "Sometimes you just have to believe, to say, 'I know you can do it.' Is that what you came for? For my faith in you?" Roland lowered his eyes. I don't know why I came. Lena's furious. Says I have to somehow convince you to change your mind. That it's my fault for not talking to you properly, for not placating you." "Placate," I repeated slowly. "Interesting word choice. Don't cling to words." He waved his hand irritably. "You know what I mean." "I do," I nodded, "and it only confirms my decision." Roland looked at me for a long moment with a mixture of anger, despair, and a childish resentment. "You know," he said at last, "I've spent my whole life trying to earn your approval, to be what you wanted me to be. But it never worked. I didn't become an engineer like you. I didn't build a brilliant career. I didn't make millions. And you never missed a chance to remind me of that. I never demanded that you become an engineer or a millionaire," I objected. "I only wanted you to be a responsible person, not to give up halfway, not to expect someone to solve your problems for you." "What about Talia?" he suddenly asked. "Did you force her to be responsible too? Or did you have different standards for her?" "Talia never asked for money for her crazy ideas. She always knew exactly what she wanted and went for it." Of course she did. Rollin splashed his hands. Talia was the perfect daughter, always doing the right thing, always meeting your expectations. And I'm a disappointment. It's not a competition, Rollin. It's not? I think it is. And I've always lost in it. He jumped up and started pacing around the room, waving his arms. You know what the most frustrating thing is? That I really wanted to get that degree. Not for the money or the career, for me, to prove that I could. That I'm not the total loser you always thought I was. I never thought you were a loser, I said quietly. You didn't? He stopped and looked at me. What else do you call a man who, at 42, is still living from paycheck to paycheck? Who can't provide for his family without daddy's help? Who, his voice trembled, who can't even prove to his own father that he's worth anything? There was so much pain in his words, so much lingering resentment that my heart clenched, but I couldn't back down. Not now. Rollin, I said, if you really want to get this degree for yourself, not for money or career, you'll find a way to do it, even without my help, especially without her. You mean you won't change your mind? He looked at me with a childish disbelief, as if he was hoping that this was all just a bad dream. No, I answered firmly. I won't change my mind. Roland stood there for a few seconds, as if he didn't know what to say or do. Then he turned abruptly and headed for the exit. You're going to regret this, he said over his shoulder. When you're alone, all alone with your precious money instead of your family, you'll regret it. He slammed the door so hard that the glass in the windows rattled. I remained sitting in the chair, looking at the dark sea outside the window, and thinking that maybe I was already regretting. But not for my decision, but for bringing my relationship with my son to this state. A month passed. I hadn't heard from Rollin. Talia called twice a week, but she carefully avoided the subject of her brother. I didn't ask, realizing she was caught between two fires and having a hard time. One morning when I was coming back from my walk, I met Madison, walking from school with her backpack over her shoulders. When she saw me, she stopped, clearly hesitating, then walked over. Hi, Grandpa, she said, a little embarrassed. We'd never been particularly close. Madison, unlike Kieran, rarely showed interest in the older generation. Hello, Madison, I smiled. How was school? Fine, she shrugged. Grandpa, can I ask you a question? Sure. Is it true that you're no longer helping Uncle Rollin with his studies? I nodded. Yes, it's true. Why? She looked at me with genuine curiosity, without judgment. You've always helped Kieran and me. It's hard to explain, Madison. Let's just say that sometimes help isn't good for you. Sometimes a person has to learn to cope on their own. She nodded thoughtfully. I see. Like when my mom won't give me homework hints even though she knows the answers. I smiled. Sometimes kids understand complicated things better than adults. That's about right. Only it's about much bigger things than homework. Uncle Rollin is very angry, she said suddenly. I heard him yelling at Mom on the phone, saying that you... She stammered, clearly hesitant to repeat what she'd heard. It's okay, I encouraged her. I can guess what he said. He said you're a cruel and callous old man who enjoys other people's misery, she blurted out. But that's not true. I know you're not like that. I was touched by her defense. Thank you, Madison. Your uncle is very upset right now. That's why he says things like that. In time, he'll understand. And Aunt Lena, she continued, as if determined to tell everything she knew. She told Mom that Uncle Rollin was an idiot for not being able to squeeze money out of the old man while he was still breathing. Sorry, Grandpa. Those were her words, not mine. I felt my insides tighten, so nothing had changed. I was still just a source of money for Lena. It's okay, Madison. Thanks for telling me. They had a fight, she added quietly. Uncle Rollin and Aunt Lena. Mom says they're in serious trouble. I nodded, not knowing what to say. Part of me felt bitter. I didn't want to ruin my son's marriage, whatever it was. The other part wasn't surprised. Their relationship had always seemed to me to be based more on practicality than love. I should get home, Madison said, glancing at her watch. Bye, Grandpa. Goodbye, Madison. Thank you for talking to me. She smiled and walked on. I watched her go, thinking that children often see more and understand more deeply than we realize. A week after that meeting, Talia called. Dad, did you hear the news? There was concern in her voice. What news? Lena left Rollin, took her things, and moved in with her sister. I was silent, digesting the information. Dad? Are you there? Yeah, Talia. I'm here. What happened? They had a big fight about money. Rollin can't pay his student loan and maintain their old lifestyle at the same time. Lena demanded that he drop out and focus on work, but he refused. Said he wanted to prove to you that he could finish what he started. I sighed. It was all about me again. How's he doing? Not good, Talia admitted. Lives on coffee and fast food, barely sleeps. He's trying to work and study, but it's really hard. He can't handle it, Dad. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. But it's his choice. Dad, maybe you could just… She didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. No, Talia, I won't change my mind. Roland has to learn to live on his own. Even if it destroys his marriage and his health? If his marriage is ruined because of financial difficulties, then it wasn't too strong to begin with. And as for his health, Roland is not a child. He's a grown man who decides for himself how he wants to live his life. Talia was silent for a moment, then said quietly, I understand you, Dad. I really do. But it hurts me to see Roland in pain. It hurts me too, I admitted. But sometimes you have to go through pain to get stronger. After I talked to Talia, I sat at the window for a long time, looking at the sea and thinking about Roland, about how he was struggling now, with financial problems, with his wife leaving him, with his own demons. Part of me wanted to call him, to offer help, to ease his suffering. But the other part, the harder and more determined part, knew that would be a mistake. Roland would have to make this journey on his own. I remembered myself when I was his age. I too had tough times, financial crises, problems at work, conflicts with management. But I got through it because I knew that no one would solve my problems for me. No one would lend a hand and give me money for nothing. And Roland needs to understand that. Even if the road is hard, even if I had to lose a lot of things, including his wife, who, as it turned out, was only with him for the money, my money. I closed my eyes and visualized the sea, vast, endless, unpredictable, like life. Sometimes it's calm and gentle, sometimes it's rough and dangerous, but always it demands respect and understanding of its laws. Roland must learn to swim in this sea on his own, without the lifeline of his father's wallet. Only then will he be a real man. Only then will he be truly free. And if I had to become a cruel, callous old man in his eyes to do that, well, I'm willing to bear that burden. For him, for myself, for the truth I believe in. It's been 6 months since that night at the restaurant when Roland and Lena laughed at me and I silently got up and left. 6 months since I made a decision that changed a lot of things in my life and in my son's life. Hastings was blossoming in the spring sunshine. The promenade was once again filled with tourists. Cafes put their tables outside, souvenir sellers laid out their colorful merchandise. The sea, gray and unfriendly in winter, now sparkled with all shades of blue, beckoning coolness on hot days. I still took my morning walks, though now I went farther out, all the way to the end of the pier and back, enjoying the new energy that had come into me in recent months. Perhaps it was the spring, or perhaps it was the sense of freedom that came after the breakup of a toxic relationship with my son. I learned about Roland from Talia, who called regularly, and occasionally stopped by with the kids. She tried to be sensitive, not going into details, but I could see in her face that things weren't going well for her brother. That morning she called earlier than usual, about 9 o'clock, when I had just gotten back from my walk and was making breakfast. "Dad," she said after the usual greetings, "there's something I have to tell you. About Rollin." I could tell from her tone that the news wasn't good. "I'm listening." He dropped out. He picked up his papers from the university yesterday. I remained silent, digesting the information. So he couldn't take it after all. He couldn't handle it. "Dad, are you there?" "Yeah, Talia. I'm just, thinking." It's been too hard for him to balance work and school, especially after Lena left. He tried. He really tried, but, she sighed, he just didn't have the energy. "I understand," I said quietly. "He's very depressed, Dad. He feels like a total failure. First his wife left him, and now he had to drop out of school, plus this loan, which now has to be paid off, even though he won't have a diploma. What about his job? It's holding up so far, but the bosses aren't happy. He's become absent-minded, makes mistakes. I'm afraid they might fire him if this continues." I sighed. The picture was getting ugly. Where was he living now? Oh, in his and Lena's apartment. She moved in with her sister permanently, took almost all the furniture and appliances, said she's gonna file for divorce as soon as she finds a good lawyer. "I see." There was a pause. I knew Talia was waiting for me to say something. Sympathy, regret, maybe even an offer of help, but I remained silent. "Dad," she finally said gently, "don't you think now would be a good time to, you know, give him a helping hand?" "What do you mean?" "Well, maybe help him pay off a loan or finding a new job. He's in a state right now where he might not be able to do it on his own." "Talia," I said softly, "your brother is 42 years old. He's a grown man. If he hasn't learned to cope by that age, when will he?" "But Dad—" "No. Listen, I've helped Rollin my whole life. Financially, morally, any way I could. And what did that lead to? At 40 plus, he still doesn't know how to live on his own, doesn't know how to calculate his strengths and possibilities, doesn't know how to take responsibility for his decisions." "You're cruel." I could hear the disappointment in her voice. "No, Talia, I'm a realist. And believe me, it hurts me too to see Rollin suffer. But it hurts even more to continue to indulge his infantile behavior." After talking to my daughter, I sat at the window for a long time, looking out to sea and thinking about Rollin, of the boy he had once been, inquisitive, full of energy and plans. A young man who couldn't find his place in life, jumping from one idea to another. About a man who never really grew up, continuing to live with his father's hand outstretched. Where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? Maybe I spoiled him too much as a child? Or was I too demanding, not giving him enough emotional support? Eleanor always said I was too hard on children, especially Rollin. Maybe she was right. But it was too late to think about that now. My son had grown up the way he had, and I could only hope that the current hardships would toughen him up, teach him to rely on himself at last. A week after I talked to Talia, Rollin showed up on my doorstep. I was just coming back from the store with a bag of groceries and saw him sitting on the porch steps. He had changed a lot over the past 6 months, slightly thinner, gaunt, more gray in his hair. He was dressed casually, a crumpled shirt, jeans that had clearly seen better days. "Hi, Dad," he said, rising. "Can I come in?" I nodded silently, unlocking the door. We walked into the kitchen where I started sorting through the shopping. "Tea? Coffee?" I asked without turning around. "Coffee, if that's okay," he said quietly. I put the kettle on, took the coffee out of the cupboard. Rollin had been sitting at the table the whole time, drumming his fingers on the countertop, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "How are you?" I asked finally when the coffee was ready. "I've been better," he smiled weakly. Talia said she told you about school and Lena. Yeah, she did. I failed, he shook his head. As usual. Started with enthusiasm and ended up failing. There was so much bitterness in his voice. It made my heart sink. But I couldn't help it. Why did you come, Rollin? He looked up at me, tired eyes with reddened eyelids. To talk, to explain. I don't know. He hesitated. Maybe apologize? For what? For the way I acted. For what I said in the restaurant. For being, ungrateful. I looked at him carefully, trying to see if he was sincere. Roland always knew how to be convincing when he wanted to accomplish something. And now what? I asked. I don't know, he shrugged. I just thought, maybe we could start over. Forget all the bad things, all the hurt. Start over, I repeated slowly. You mean I'll start helping you financially again, and you'll pretend to appreciate it? His face twitched. No, Dad, that's not what I mean. What are you talking about? I looked him straight in the eye. Let's be honest, Rollin. You didn't come here to apologize or make things right. You came for the money. That's not true. He slammed his fist on the table, spilling his coffee. Why do you always think the worst of me? Because I know you, son. I know how you act when you want something. First apologizing, then telling me how hard it is for you, and then asking for help. Roland jumped up from his chair, his face red with anger. You're just an old, cynical... He hesitated, obviously searching for a softer word. It doesn't matter. I come with an open heart, and you greet me with suspicion. An open heart? I grinned. Rollin, if you really wanted a relationship, you would have come sooner. Not when your life fell apart, but when things were normal. You would have come just to talk, to see how I was doing, what I was doing. No second thoughts. He was silent, and there was more recognition in that silence than in any words. Okay, he said finally. Yeah, I need help. I'm up to my eyeballs in debt. Lena left, taking almost everything. I could lose my job. My life is falling apart, Dad. And, yeah, I was hoping you could help. Because you're my dad, damn it. Isn't that what family's for? To support each other through the hard times? Family is about love and respect, Rollin, not to be a lifelong sponsor for big kids who haven't learned to take responsibility for their decisions. So you refuse to help? There was disbelief in his voice. Yes, Rollin. I refuse. He stood looking at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. Then he slowly lowered himself into a chair. You know, he said quietly, I always thought you loved me, no matter what, that I could always count on you. And it turns out that your love is conditional. It ends where the money begins. No, Rollin. My love ends where disrespect begins, and I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about how you treat me like an ATM machine instead of a human being with feelings and dignity. That's not true, he jumped up again. I've always respected you, always admired you. Yeah, have you? I raised my eyebrows. And that's why you and Lena were discussing how you could get my money while I was still alive? And is that why you laughed at me in the restaurant, calling me old-fashioned and backward? Rollin lowered his eyes. That was stupid. I'm sorry. You're only sorry because you need my money now, I remarked. If it weren't for your financial problems, you wouldn't even remember me. He didn't answer, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. I'm not giving you money, Rollin, I said calmly. Not now, not later. You'll have to work out your own problems. He looked at me with a long stare that was a mixture of resentment, anger, and disappointment. So that's it then, he said finally. You're just disown me? No, Rollin. I'm not disowning you. I'm simply ceasing to be your sponsor. If you want to talk to me like son and father, be my guest. But if you just want my money, the door's that way. He stood up, looking at me with undisguised anger. You know what? You're right. I needed your money. Because I'm desperate. Because I have no one else to turn to. And yeah, maybe I haven't been the best son. Maybe I haven't always treated you with the respect you deserve. But what you're doing now is cruel. No, Rollin. It would be cruel to continue to indulge your irresponsibility. It would be cruel to let you continue to live under the illusion that there will always be someone to solve your problems for you. Fine, he headed for the exit. Just fine. Someday, when you're lying in the hospital, alone and forgotten, remember this conversation. I will, I replied calmly. And you too, the next time you decide to take out a loan for another breakthrough idea. He slammed the door so hard that a photograph fell off the wall, an old picture of us as a family at the beach. Me, Eleanor, and little Talia and Rollin. I picked up the photo, shaking off the shards of glass. Happy faces, cloudless time. Where had it all gone? The next day, I met with Henry Wakefield again, this time to finalize the changes to the will. Are you sure? Henry asked when I explained that I wanted to disinherit Rollin completely. It's a big step. I'm sure, I nodded. Rollin has gotten enough from me in his lifetime, more than most children get from their parents. Let the rest go to those who really value me and not my money. We've drawn up all the necessary papers. According to the new will, most of my property, the house, savings, securities, went to Talia and her children, with a special share for Kieran. Roland would get nothing except his father's clock in the hall, the same one he'd once called junk. When I walked out of Henry's office, it was peaceful. It was as if I'd lifted a heavy weight off my shoulders that I'd been carrying for years. A load of false expectations, unfulfilled hopes, disappointments. 2 more months passed. I never heard from Rollin. Talia called regularly, telling him the news. Rollin had found a new job, with a smaller salary but more stable. He moved to a smaller apartment, sold his car to pay off some of his debts. Lena filed for divorce, demanding half of the property, although there was not much to take. Kieran came by every week to talk about his studies, about new books he had read, about his plans for the future. Once he brought a girl with him, a sweet history student with serious eyes and a quiet voice. They planned to get married after graduation. I watched my grandson and thought about how amazingly genetics works. Kieran was so much like me, not outwardly, but inwardly. The same thoroughness, the same quiet persistence, the same responsibility for his decisions. And yet he didn't have my rigidity, my inability to express emotion. The best version of me, I thought with a smile. One evening, as I sat on the veranda watching the sunset, the phone rang. The number was an unfamiliar one. Ah, Baxter Newkirk speaking, I said, picking up the receiver. Minus Mr. Newkirk, came a woman's voice. This is Adeline Pruitt, your son's ex-wife. Lena? I was surprised. To what do I owe the honor? I wanted to talk to you, about Rollin. I'm listening. He's in a very bad way, Mr. Newkirk. I saw him the other day when he came to pick up the last of his things. He looks terrible, thin, gaunt. He's living in a shithole, barely making ends meet. Why are you telling me this? I asked, although I already knew the reason for the call. Because you're his father, because you could help him. He's too proud to ask for it himself, but… He came, Lena, I interrupted her. He came and asked for money, and he was turned down. But why? In her voice sounded sincere incomprehension. You have the means. I could do a lot of things, I agreed. But I won't. Rollin must learn to live on his own, without Daddy's help. You're a cruel man, she said, after a pause. Maybe. But remember, Lena, weren't you the one who called me the old cheapskate who takes too long to die? Didn't you accuse Rollin of not being able to squeeze money out of an old man? There was silence on the phone. You heard, she finally said. I heard, and I remembered, as well as the fact that you left my son as soon as you realized there would be no more money. So I'm sorry, but your sudden concern for Rollin doesn't convince me. You don't understand anything." Her voice trembled. "I loved Rollin. I really did. But I couldn't live with a man who couldn't provide for his family, who was constantly changing plans, starting and abandoning projects. And yet you were quite happy while I was paying his bills," I said dryly. "That's not fair," she exclaimed. "I supported him, believed in him. As long as there was money," I finished for her. "Look, Lena, I'm not judging you. You're free to make your life as you see fit, but don't try to use me in your games. It won't work anymore." I hung up the phone, feeling strangely satisfied. In the past, a conversation like this would have thrown me off balance, made me question my decisions. But not now. I knew I was doing the right thing, for me and for Rollin, even though he didn't realize it yet. It had been a year since that night at the restaurant. I sat on my veranda, watching the sunset, as bright and beautiful as the one Eleanor and I had watched the day we bought this house. Back then, we dreamed of a long, happy life here, of growing old together, watching our children and grandchildren grow up. Life turned out differently. Eleanor left sooner than we planned, and things with the kids were more complicated than we thought. Talia grew up to be independent and responsible. Our relationship was never particularly warm. I didn't know how to express my feelings, and she was too proud to seek approval. But there was always respect and understanding between us. She never asked for money for nothing, always counted on her own strength. And her children, especially Kieran, grew up the same way. Rollin, on the other hand, was a different story. Perhaps I spoiled him as a child, forgave his mistakes and laziness too easily. Or perhaps I was too demanding, making him feel like he was never up to my standards. Whatever the case, he grew up to be a man incapable of taking responsibility for his life, always looking for easy ways and outside help. And I've indulged that for far too long, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of a misunderstood paternal love. But a year ago, I finally found the strength to say no, to end the cycle of addiction and manipulation. It was a hard decision. It cost me my relationship with my son, brought many sleepless nights and heavy thoughts. But now, looking at the sunset and reflecting on the past year, I felt like I had done the right thing. I had regained my self-respect, stopped being the ATM that everyone takes for granted. I started living for myself, reading books I wanted to read, taking walks I enjoyed, socializing with people who saw me as a person, not a source of money. And most importantly, I gave Roland a chance to grow up, through pain, through hardship, through loss, but to grow up for real, to learn to take responsibility for his decisions, to live within his means, to rely on himself, not on others. Talia told me he's slowly coming around. He got a steady job, stopped building castles, and started planning his life more realistically. They were first, tentative steps toward adulthood, but steps in the right direction. He didn't communicate with me. Perhaps he never would. Perhaps the chasm that had formed between us was too deep to bridge. But I've learned to live with that thought. I've learned to accept the consequences of my decisions, both good and bad. After all, wasn't that what I was trying to teach Rollin? The sun disappeared over the horizon, coloring the sky in shades of pink and gold. I remembered Eleanor's words, "Look closely, Baxter. You'll never see a sunset like this again." She was right. Every sunset is unique, just as every day of our lives is unique. And you have to learn to appreciate each one without expecting tomorrow to be just as you planned. I got up from the chair and walked into the house. I turned on the light in the living room and looked at the clock, the antique one I'd gotten from my father, the same one Rollin had once called junk. The only thing I'd left him as a legacy, not out of vengeance, but as a reminder of a time that couldn't be taken back, of decisions that couldn't be undone, of words that couldn't be taken back. Kieran was supposed to stop by tomorrow, bringing a new book he'd recommended I read. We were going to have tea on the veranda, talk about history, about philosophy, about life. The simple joys that now formed the basis of my days. I didn't know how many more such days I had in store for me. At my age, every year is a gift, every month a time to be treasured. But I no longer feared death. I wasn't afraid of loneliness. I wasn't afraid of regret. I had lived a long life, made a lot of mistakes, made a lot of tough decisions. And the last one, maybe the hardest, was to let Rollin go, letting him fall so he could learn to get up on his own, even if it meant never seeing my son again. It was a high price to pay, but I was willing to pay it for myself, for my self-respect, for the sake of spending the last years of my life at peace with myself. And perhaps someday, Rollin will realize that it was done not out of cruelty, not out of avarice, not out of petty revenge, but out of love, complicated, imperfect, but true fatherly love, the kind of love that sometimes has to be firm to help a child become a real man.